The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Ling. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing with our review of the player cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. This time we're taking a look at the Seeker/Mystic multi-class cards. There are 3 of them: Divination Level 1, Divination Level 4, and Protecting the Anirniq. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Autofail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular investigator get a Bless token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the optional list of taboos or that are just bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty for the art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. We are back with our review of the player cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. We are talking about the Seeker and Mystic cards in this episode. We're going to start off with Divination. It's a 3-cost asset that costs 1 experience point. It has an intellect skill icon, the spell and augury traits. Uses 4 charges. As an action, you may investigate. For this investigation, you may use your willpower instead of your intellect, and you get +1 skill value. If you succeed, spend 1 or 2 charges. Instead of discovering a clue at your location, discover 1 clue at your location for each charge spent. If you succeed by 0, choose and discard a card from your hand, and it takes up an arcane slot. So this is similar to the Brand of Cthulhu that we looked at in the Guardian Mystic cards. Again, you have the option of waiting until you succeed to spend the charges. What do you guys think about this one?
Pretty boring, in my opinion. I just feel like at this point we've seen so many flavors of these types of spells that they all just kind of mesh together, and I kind of forget about them. Think about like the differences between like clairvoyance, rite of seeking. You know, they all do essentially the same thing, but with a different flavor to them, and this one just essentially feels like the same thing. What is nice about this one, however, is that you can kind of modulate how many clues you get. So if you're playing solo, you can use this 4 times. If you're playing 2-player, you can use it a couple times. But yeah, I guess the other nice thing about it too is that it does cost 3 resources, where most of these like Rite of Seeking and what is it, Eye of Chaos, those cost 4 and 5 respectively. So you are getting this on the cheap, quote unquote. The other thing is that this is a Mystic card. This is not a Seeker card. You know, like Seekers just have so many better ways of getting clues that don't cost experience. I mean, comparing this thing to Fingerprint Kit is sad.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. Fingerprint Kit actually gives you a total of 6 clues, where this gives you a total of 4.
And it's always 4 clues.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it feels like, compared to Rite of Seeking Level 0, it feels a little nudged in its like numbers, where in that it costs less, and you get the +1 skill value over Rite of Seeking Level 0. But yeah, it's kind of boring. It's definitely a Mystic card, that's for sure. But I guess there's some like outside build of Seeker where you need both your hands for other things, so you play this.
Maybe Joe, I guess.
Yeah, maybe someone like Joe Diamond. So when do you run this over 6th Sense?
Maybe in 2-player?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because 1 investigate gets both clues. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just another, dial to taste.
And the other nice thing about this, too, is that you spend the charges when you succeed. It's not like with Rite of Seeking, you spend them, and then you could fail, which sucks. But it's just like we've seen so many types of these cards that, like, Brand of Cthulhu, Divination, and the Rogue Mystic one that we'll talk about later, they all just feel the same to me, and it's just, I guess my only complaint is that I wish that they would do more with the Mystic Arcane slot, because it feels like they've figured out what to do with it in other classes, but we're still basically getting Rite of Seeking 6 cycles into the game, and it's just like, eh.
So here's what I think happened. I think the mistake, which they could have corrected in the revised core, and they did to a small extent, I think Rite of Seeking and Shriveling with upgrades needed to be in the core. And because they weren't, because those were in Dunwich, they then realized that every single cycle they've got to print clones of Rite of Seeking, Mists of Rillier, and Shriveling with their upgrades every cycle. What kind of disappoints me is that I was hoping that the Jacqueline Fine starter deck, because she comes with a whole suite of asset spells, that would mean they wouldn't have to do this anymore. But I guess the starter deck isn't really a starter deck. It's an optional deck, now, because it's not for starting. It doesn't start you off. It just side grades. Yeah, which is kind of too bad. It feels like we get like the 6 to 8 card tax on Mystics every cycle. Because they keep having to do this. I mean, at least they're trying by like merging it in with a Seeker card. Like they're trying, and they only have 2 stages instead of 3. But
Yeah.
I see what you mean, Nate. Yeah.
And like the one Mystic in the box doesn't really want this. Like I don't think Norman really wants a card like this. Like he could play it to pretty decent effect, obviously, but I feel like there's just better things he could be doing.
Yeah,
well,
it's
he
true.
is investigating with a 6 with this, since he can use his willpower or use his intellect rather than his willpower if he wants.
Yeah.
So
and it combos with
it's
Magnifying
decent.
Glass, so you still get your Magnifying Glass bonus. Yeah, so you get that. I mean, it's not like on paper it doesn't look too bad. It's kind of boring. You know what I wish this did? I wish it let you do remote investigation. Just to change it up a little bit,
Especially in a campaign that's all about moving around the map.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a little boring, on the boring side, simply because we have received so many of these triads at this point that they're all sort of blending together, and I still tend to play the good old Shriveling Mists, right, Sixth Sense combos, so I don't know how often I'll be buying this, to be honest, or its upgrade that we'll look at in a moment. I just tend to forget that the others exist. It's always hard for me to name the ones that are in the Jacqueline Fine starter deck because I just haven't really played with them all that much. And then, of course, the ones in the Innsmouth, it's the same. I just know they deal with curse tokens, and since I rarely play with curse tokens in Mystic, that I don't need to worry about those ones. So how would we rate this one?
In a vacuum, if you're a new player and you're just picking up Edge of the Earth and you have the revised core set, this is fine. I'd give it a 0. It's going to do what it says on the card, and that will be serviceable. It's just not very exciting.
I'm actually going to go as far as a +1, because I think, like, by the numbers, it's actually pretty good. The fact that you don't have to spend any charges until after you succeed. The fact that I think choosing and discarding a card from your hand is less bad than Rite of Seeking's End Your Turn. And
that's true.
Yeah, I think just by the numbers, it's pretty good. Plus, like, I think it works. If you're an investigator who has intellect, like you're Marie or you're playing Norman, and your intellect's pretty good, then just the fact that you can combo this with like Magnifying Glass, and other intellect buffs, like I think that's pretty nice too. So yeah, I'm giving this a +1 actually.
I'm going to give this one a +1 as well. I think the skill bonus is nice. The ability to spend the charges after you succeed or not. I mean, that's one of the biggest issues with Rite of Seeking, is that you spend the charge up front and then of course you fail and that feels bad. And of course with Rite of Seeking you can also basically end your turn prematurely if you're not careful. This one, discarding a card is not a particularly painful thing to do. I guess if you're looking to maybe upgrade your level 0 rights into something like this, I don't think I would upgrade my Sixth Senses into this, but I would certainly be willing to pick up a copy of this to supplement Sixth Sense and know, especially in solo, where it's like, okay, I need to spend 1 charge here and 2 charges there, and you could sort of meet out the charges as necessary to gather the clues efficiently, whereas Right often ends up, it's just like, well, I'm going to get 2 clues, but I only needed 1, so I'm kind of wasting a charge. I also tend to play like 2 6 cents and 1 right in my decks and just sort of rely on the right as I need it, and then 6 cents carries me the rest of the way, and or skills. I shouldn't forget to mention skills as well. You know, if you've got some wild skill icons to pick up those clues at one, low shroud locations where you just don't want to bother. I do like 6 cents more than this because I have been playing it a lot lately, and I find that ability to investigate at a location that you are not at is very, very useful in a lot of situations. You can move to a location with a low shroud and pick up a clue at a location with a much higher shroud, or at a location that's worth VPs and stuff like that. So I'm not replacing 6 cents with this, but I can certainly see its appeal. That brings us to its level 4 counterpart, Divination. Again, 3 cost, has willpower and intellect skill icons, spell and augury trait. This one enters play with 6 charges. As an action, you can investigate. For this investigation, you may use your willpower instead of your intellect, and you get +2 skill value. If you succeed, spend 1, 2, or 3 charges. Instead of discovering a clue at your location, discover 1 clue at your location for each charge spent. If you succeed by 0, choose and discard 2 cards from your hand, and it takes up an arcane slot. What do we think about Divination 4? Is it worth the 3 more XP for a +2 skill value and the option to discover 3 clues?
So that's a bit misleading, because I feel like if you're playing this card, you're going to be playing Arcane Research or Down the Rabbit Hole or something that's going to reduce the experience.
No. Let's not rate the cards based on other cards.
I mean, I feel like spell upgrades kind of have to be judged by that, just because they're so ubiquitous. I know, but it's like that. They all do that. They're all costed that way for a reason, and it feels like Arcane Research is the reason. I mean, that being said, you're getting +2, which is pretty good. And like we were saying with the original version, being able to spend the charges after you succeed is really nice. And discovering 3 clues, I think, is, apart from Rite of Seeking level 4, there's no other Mystic card that does that, and that's pretty good. While I wasn't super impressed with the original version, I think this one's pretty good.
I'm actually going to go the opposite way. I think it loses out to both Rite of Seeking upgrades at this point. Because if you're playing 3-player, especially 3-player, Rite of Seeking level 4, it's the same XP as this, but it gives you 3 bursts of 3 clues and same bonus to your test, where this gives you 2 bursts of 3 clues. Meanwhile, Rite of Seeking level 2 gives you the same boost to your check, but gives you multiple boosts, gives you like more boosts of 2 clues if you're playing 2-player. So I feel like with the level 1 Divination, I feel like it beats out Rite of Seeking 0. And it's also really good in solo, but I think this one kind of falls short of Rite of Seeking level 2 or 4 based on the size of your table.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't play multiplayer all that often, so while I can definitely see the appeal of playing Divination 1 in solo, this one I have a much harder time deciding whether I like it or not.
You're spending 3 XP. You don't really get very much. You get +1 to your skill value, in solo. Because if you're only going to use it to pick up 1 clue at a time, like all this really gives you is +1 skill value and a couple extra charges.
Yeah, I wouldn't buy this, and if I was playing solo, I can definitely see the appeal of spending 3 charges to grab 3 clues, because that's pretty unusual in the card pool. There aren't many cards that let you do that. In solo, you never spend 3 charges. I have a really tough time thinking of situations where I need to gather. There are some locations in the game where you end up with piles of clues on them, but typically they have some sort of trick to investigating them. I'm thinking of like the Black Core in Dark Side of the Moon, or there's that the location in Where the Gods Dwell, that the number of clues depends on how many signs of Kadath or whatever you found. And so, not saying it doesn't happen in solo, but it's just so rare that spending 4 XP and then having to figure out, okay, did I purchase down the rabbit hole, or did I play Mateo or in the thick of it so I can grab this for somewhat cheaper and whatnot. Yeah, this one doesn't appeal to me as much. So I will have to take your word for it, Matt, as to whether this is how this competes with Rite of Seeking in the multiplayer format. How would we rate this one?
I'm going to stick with 0. While you guys may besmirch it a little bit, I think in 2-player it's still pretty good. Yeah, it is a bit expensive experience-wise, but I think it just kind of ticks the right amount of boxes for me in 2-player that I like it. It doesn't have too bad of a downside. You're getting 3 bursts of 2 clues at +2, which is essentially Rite of Seeking level 2, which is nice. For basically 3 experience or 2 experience, it's not bad.
Yeah, I'd also call it a 0 as well, because it might not outpace Rite of Seeking level 2 or 4 based on your table size. It's still it works. So, and it gets you the clues you need to succeed. So I'd give it a 0. This one doesn't clear the bar. It's right at the bar, if that makes sense.
I'm going to give this one a 0 as well, but this is one of those cards that I don't know if I'll ever play it, because I don't play multiplayer that often, and I usually stick to the tried and true Rite of Seeking and whatnot when I do play. So maybe, but yeah, this one is seems good, but yeah, not exciting. That brings us to the final Seeker Mystic card. This is Protecting the Anirniq, or Anirniq. Protecting the Anirniq. It is a 1-cost event that costs 2 experience points. It has intellect and agility skill icons, the ritual trait. It is fast. Play after an ally asset at your location is discarded by an effect or is defeated. Either return that asset to its owner's hand or its owner draws 3 cards. What do we think about Protecting the Anirniq?
This feels weirdly off flavor for me. This feels like it should be a Survivor Mystic card. I don't know what Seeker is doing on here. That's weird. Is it just a Seeker card because it draws cards?
I think so.
But the problem is we have to taboo it because it doesn't have the insight trait like every other Seeker event.
Okay. That aside, the effect is fine, I guess. Like, the first couple comparisons that I make is Preposterous Sketches and Sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
And people play prop sketches, certainly. It's a pretty easy effect to be able to get. Draw 3 cards if there's a clue in your location. But Sacrifice is a card that I think initially people played quite a bit of. It gets you resources or it gets you cards based on discarding an asset, a mystic asset, if I'm remembering that correctly. And this kind of does the same thing. Kind of. But you're paying more experience for it, and you get the flexibility of putting the ally back into your hand. And that's nice and all. I guess it is also nice that it's in the 2 classes that have, I think, the most amount of disposable allies, quote unquote.
Oh, okay.
Because Mystics have Renfield and Arcane Initiate that stack Doom on them, so there comes a point where you probably need to get rid of them. And then the Seekers have Art Student and Laboratory Assistant that do their thing, and then you can pick them back up or, let them die, and you're usually okay with that. Mm-hmm. So getting some additional benefit out of those situations is pretty nice, but I don't know. It's kind of awkward.
Yeah, the fact that you gotta wait to play this means this is no Cryptic Research, but at the same time, Cryptic Research is 4 XP. So it seems fine. I think it definitely has its uses in particular decks, like the Academic Army style decks, where you play art students and lab assistants and research librarians, just lots of disposable allies. Yeah, and I think you can say the same about Mystics. You play David Renfield, you lose your David Renfield, you get 3 cards, or you get your David Renfield back if you're low on money. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I wouldn't say it's incredible, simply because a lot of card draw you want to be able to do it proactively. And this one, you don't get to do it proactively, so it's it's fine. But the fact that it's fast, like you can't argue with that. Fast, draw 3 cards. That's pretty good.
Unless you have a way to kill your allies. Like if you're playing Forbidden Knowledge or something like that.
Ooh, yeah, then you could turn it into like an engine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As a Mystic player, this sort of appeals to me simply because of the lose an asset, lose an ally, draw 3 cards. I mean, card draw like that isn't that common in Mystic, certainly. And
right.
I mean, Seekers, they have other options, so I don't know how interested they would be in this, although they do have lots of disposable allies. But you know, drawing 3 cards as a Mystic isn't too bad. I mean, when I first saw this card, my mind immediately leapt to the Red Gloved Man, because he's kind of a pain in the butt to get back. And this, you lose the Red Gloved Man and then pull him back to your hand and get to play him again, which is pretty damn nice.
Man. Oh, if you're doing Red Glove Man, you totally deserve to do it even more.
Yeah. So yeah. I had a Tommy deck, and I was very disappointed to see I can't really play this in Tommy, but I think there are probably other players out there who have enjoyed the Red Gloved Man who will rejoice that this card exists, that you can sack the Red Gloved Man and then pull him back to your hand and play him again. So you're getting, 4 uses, or, an extra use out of your Red Gloved Man. And again, it comes down to the 2 experience points. Am I, as a Mystic player, going to pick this up for 2 XP? I don't know. If you're playing again down the rabbit hole, this is 3 XP, at which point I think it prices itself out of the market a little bit. I'm not too sure I'd be willing to spend 3 XP to draw 3 cards. But
do we have to rate every card like this? Like,
yes.
and no, at the same time, does that mean that every card that's level 1, 2, or 3, we have to say, would I take this within the thick of it? I don't know. We'll have to
yeah, I think this card is fine. I can definitely see Mystics picking this up because they do have Renfield and the Initiate, who they want to sack at some point, and getting 3 cards out of the deal, or getting Renfield back is a pretty nice as well, because I find the resource generation is nice, but I also like the willpower bonus, and that is usually the reason I am not sacking him, is not the resource generation, but it's I need the willpower. And so having the option of getting him back into my hand so I can play him again is a nice option. How would we rate this one?
This is awkward because it's a fine effect, but how often I actually play this card for me actually really influences my ratings. And I'm not willing to give it an Elder thing, but as far as like how often I play it, it probably would get an Elder thing. Ooh. But it's a good effect, so I'm going to give it a 0.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, just by the numbers, cost 1, fast, draw 3 cards, that's really good. The question is, what's up?
Well, it's kind of draw 3. The issue is that you have to have a card in play, so that's 1 card.
Yeah.
You have to have this in your hand, and then you draw 3, so you're really only getting +1 out of the deal.
Yeah, the question is like, how often does this thing happen? Ally asset at your location. Oh, you can help your friends with this. That's something that is like you're never gonna like consider, but you can. Yeah, I'll go with 0. I'm pulling the trigger, Nate. I'm going 0.
There is one combo I'll mention, and it's agency backup. You could have the player kill off their agency backup and then scoop it back up into their hand, and they could play it again.
And then they high five you, for being such a bro.
Yeah.
For giving them his agency backup, giving them their agency backup back.
One of the other potential ideas I had with this one is the sled dog. So you have your 3 or 4 sled dogs in play. It's just like, oh, one of my sled dogs dies. Oh, I get it back, so I can keep your sled dogs on the table and not feel too bad about sacrificing one if you need to soak. And it doesn't sort of, if you're like when we talked about sled dogs, Matt, you said, you sort of want 2 on the table at least. And this sort of lets you make sure that happens for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Man, I'd kind of like to go +1 on this one just because I do like the draw and the option of picking it back up. But I feel like it's a little more conditional than just draw 3 or so. I think I'll settle on a 0 for this one. Although I do like it, and I think I would be tempted to play this depending on what my deck setup looks like. I'm just not too sure about the experience points. That's the trick for me, I think, playing in solo, and as a solo player, you tend to have to run with fewer XP than the people who play multiplayer. So cards like this often end up falling by the wayside just because if you run short of XP, cards like this don't get played because you're too busy upgrading everything else just to make your deck better. And having the luxury of this is not really an option. But I do really like this one. Fast, can't really complain. You can play it for cheap with, I think it's Antiquary is the one that triggers on rituals. So that's nice. So yeah, 0s across the board for protecting the Anirniq. That's going to do it for our look at the Seeker and Mystic cards. Let us know in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree. We'd love to hear from you. Any final thoughts on the Seeker/Mystic multi-class cards?
These feel more like Mystic cards than they do Seeker cards.
Yeah, they do. Mystic cards, but they ran out of room for Mystic cards, so they just stuck them in Seeker, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically just like Mystics now investigate. So it's a little disappointing in my opinion. You know, the Divination is basically just a Mystic card, but they just slapped the Seeker logo onto you.
Yeah.
It's just fine. But protecting the Anirniq is interesting. I don't know how often I'll play it, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it has an effect that we haven't really seen all that often, so I will give it that. I don't think any of these cards are bad by any stretch. I mean, they're just sort of, at least with Divination, it's, you know, we're back on very familiar ground yet again with the card design, and so I don't know how many cycles these, you know, fight, investigate, evade effects we're going to see. I feel like they've got to be sort of reaching the bottom of the barrel at this point. I'm not too sure how much design space is left, so who knows, maybe in the next Investigator expansion we'll see something fresh, or we could just see more of the same. Who knows? That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.